So that should help. So please ask any questions you want. Stay muted and put your questions in the chat, and Stella is going to be paying attention to the chat.
Yes, I will.
To let me know. Okay, so I thought we would start first with the actual trumpet panels. There's 5 of them. And what I like to do later is laminate glue 2 pieces of paper together to make this T. And it's a very special way to make it so that you can get it stretched out as much as possible, because we're going to be using my beloved 180-gram Italian paper. And we need to stretch it out to get the machine lines out and the creping out. Okay, on your Brugmansia template page you'll be getting in the email, this is 1/2 of one of the trumpet panels. So if you cut it on a fold, you're going to get a whole panel, and you're going to need 5 of those. It's very clear on this sheet that that's what you're going to be up to. What I like to do, question.
Are you using the peach to pink paper?
I am, and I will go over that in just a moment. I am using peach pink paper. I'm just going over the basics of why I'm about to do what I'm going to do. So I need to make a piece of glued paper that will accommodate me cutting out this full panel. So you can see I overshoot it big time, and I'm going to do this live for you to show you how I make this laminated paper, but I really overshoot it so I can make sure that I can get this cut out of it. And also what I do like to do, and what I do for my students, I just taught this when I was in England in September, is take this template and then trace it onto a piece of, I would use either, well, I just bought chipboard, thin chipboard, but you could use like a cereal box or a cracker box or something, and that would be fine. Are you letting that person in?
Oh, yeah.
Where'd they go?
I got it.
Okay. Okay, so you want to trace your template onto something hard so that you can trace it onto this paper. Okay, that's just like a little preamble about what I'm about to do. Okay, so this is actually a paper I designed for Carta Tecnica Rossi, the Italian paper maker. You'll be getting a sources list if you're not familiar with Italian paper. This is number 17A7, peach to pink. You can make this Brugmansia out of any color you want, but this paper is good and strong because not only does it have some dye in this part, it's then got the spray paint, like the acrylic paint that they put on the ends, that makes it even stronger. So that's why I love to work with these kind of papers on my large scale work. The more color, the stronger the paper is going to be. I have made this in yellow before, and this was yellow, 2 layers of yellow, just laminated together the same way I'm going to show you what I'm doing with this. It had a little less strength, but it's fine. The glue washes the color out in some places, but you could touch that up again with a chalk. But that's some of the perils you'll run into if you're using a more volatile paper like this yellow happened to be. But this was just like your standard 180-gram yellow. So if you're looking for that, and then I touched it up with some orange little highlights here, and I didn't finish detailing it, but that's basically that. That's why I use this paper. It's the right color for this specific Brugmansia, and it's strong. So when I'm teaching and I want to make a bulk of the panel pieces that I cut out for all my students, which makes it goes faster. Like when I was in the UK, everybody got 5 of these pre-cut. Otherwise, we would have spent a whole day, not a whole day, but a lot of extra time making the pieces. But if you're wanting to make a bulk of Brugmansia, a little tip is you could find an area here where it's like only pink at the bottom and then light all the way up. But if you want to get the most out of your roll, you want to go down to the bottom machine line, and you're going to want to be starting your template at that bottom machine line and then come up here. And then if you see where that ends and you flip it over, you'll end up at a machine line there too. This one's so big here, I could also move it down there and that would be okay. Could you let Megan M in, please? So do you see what I mean? If you want to maximize how many you can get out of a roll, you want to kind of move down. But if you're just flight of fancy having fun and you want to be right in the middle of your paper, you can do that as well. I'm going to work down in the lower sections today. Okay. So that said, you want to know what you're working with. So I can see right there that I'm going to need a piece about that high. As with all my demos, I've prepared all the steps in advance, so you won't have to watch me do 10,000 things. This is all ready to go. I'm just showing you each step. So I'm going to cut that bottom machine line off of this one as well. I would say when you're first starting, I don't know exactly how much paper you would need, but I would say start with something like 10 inches or so. That should give you enough to make the piece you need to make. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stretch this out evenly and as far as I can. And this paper is extremely strong, so you can really pull as much crepe as you can. Because it's so tall, sometimes I would run that over the edge of a table or something, but this is a very tall piece and that doesn't go very well. So you just want to stretch as much crepe as you can out. Oh, just really hug on that the best you can. Okay. And now I'm going to fold that back over. And that's what I'm going to be working with. You can see that there is some excess and some waste here. I'm sure if I were to really think about it and make a ton of these, I would probably be able to figure out how to save that before, you know, there's ways to conserve, but I'm going to move quickly here. So again, I'm looking for a piece that's going to be glued about this much. And you do that by, if you're just starting out like you will be at home, you take your template and just kind of remember, I'm going to need at least this much coverage here, and I could have gone lower here. So like down there. So I'm going to glue that much, and I'll do that for you right now. I'm basically gluing an upside down T. I use tacky glue, Aleene's tacky glue for all of my small paper flower pursuits. So I'll be doing something like that. The side that gets the glue is going to be the smoother side at the end. I'll show you that later, but because you're applying this glue, and I do this in the direction of the grain, this is a little overkill, but that's okay because I'm just going to be being sloppy today to get this done. This is a lot extra, so you can do this with much more care than I've done it right now. Anyway, I'm going all the way down and in that T shape. I'm going to take some of that off. That's a little bonkers. Make sure you're watching for people's stuff. Okay, and then I'm gonna finish that up. Okay, so that should be my coverage. Again, more than I need, but I hate making one of these and then realize somehow I didn't line my template up the correct way or whatever. So this is going to be great. Okay, you can all see there's a T of glue there and it goes all the way down, covers everything. Okay, so now you're going to carefully, not do that. You're going to carefully fold it back down, the bottom being the plates you really want to match up the best because you want that you're going to bring your template all the way down to the bottom of this area and you want that, and then smooth in the direction of the grain, and you can go like this. Okay, then let's get our hands really clean. I'm just gonna rub that off. I got a little spot there, but that's okay. There's a question. Oh, have you ever used stitch witchery to do this step? I have not but I encourage you to try it. I'm imagining that's like some iron-on sewing thing, Shyla. That, yeah, I would definitely give that a try. I've never tried it, but I bet it would work. Okay, so I've now flipped it over. So the side that's up and facing me, it was the wet side, not the wet side, but it's the side that I applied the glue to. Does everybody catch that? I'm going to say that again. It was, when I made it, it was like this, then I flipped this down, but now I'm going to be working with the side that's wetter, because that's the side that's going to be the smoothest in the long run. Okay. It's still very crepey. That's okay, because what we're going to do, this is something I learned through trial and error, and this is a great tip to you. Maybe you can use it in other areas too. Were I to start stretching the crepe out of it now, I would get an uneven stretch because this part doesn't have glue on it, but this part does, and this part does. So it's going to angle, it's going to do weird things, and you're not going to get an even stretch. So before you stretch out the rest of the crepe, you want to take your scissors and you want to cut into the glued area so that you're only working with a piece of paper that has glue on it. So I'm actually cutting through the glued part. I'm going to figure out where I glued down here. I feel like I went a little lower than I normally do. So like that. Right, so there's half of my tea. I feel like I might have to fix that a little bit. Okay. And then here, I'm in the wet part. And I'm coming up like that. Okay, so there's the tea. These are the parts I cut away that are still dry and can be preserved for something else. Clean your hands off again. And then we're going to stretch. So now I'm only, and you got to be careful in this area because you don't want to rip it at the intersection. I'm going to carefully start working through and pulling the crepe out. Remembering that the amount of this you're actually going to need is smaller. But if you were to try to do this with this cutout, if you were trying to do this with less waste, I guess, it would be, you could obviously save, I could have come even further down there, but doing this kind of thing, if you're applying 2 layers together and you're trying to glue it, it gets really out of control. So you do have to use a little excess here. And I'm still pulling. Pulling. Okay, so that's how you create your raw material for your panel. I'll smooth it. I'll probably, there's a lot of babysitting on this. Like I'll probably come back to this a few times and babysit a bit more, pull it a little bit more, make sure all the wrinkles are out. Here's a quick side note. So this is pretty smooth. I did a pretty good job. Let me see if turning on the light on this thing will, I never really liked that, but Stella, could you go around and just click the light on really quick? It's the on button. Oh. Okay. No, it's washed out. Okay, this is fine. So this is fairly smooth, especially the outside that I'm going to use. That's about as smooth as I can get it. When I was teaching in the UK, it was rainy. The stuff had been in storage there for 2 months because I shipped my materials ahead of time. And then it rained the day we were putting the pieces together. And so if you work in certain circumstances, you may end up with slightly more, it's not really legible here, but you could end up with slightly more texture that you may not want. So I would say make sure it's not very humid and not very wet out. Don't make these outdoors in the rainstorm, which is basically what we were doing in the carriage house we were in the UK, which was lovely, but a little bit too wet. Okay, so I'm coming back to this. I'm stretching. Then I leave it out to dry, like for a couple hours. Okay, maybe I'll come back to it in 5 minutes and I'll stretch it out. So that goes on the floor and I let it dry out and that's done. That's laminating. We good? Okay. So here's a piece I've already laminated. Next move. Remember which side is your smooth side. This side, I'm wondering if maybe you come closer, you can see it like that. Still a little grainy. Could you press the paper under a book? Jessica, that's a great question. Could I press the paper under a book or something heavy? I think that the biggest things that play with this paper are more the recontraction of the very strong crepe and also getting it dried out. So I would say only when it's absolutely dry and all your stretching is done, you could store it under a book. But as far as getting the crepe out, you really need the tension, the outward tension. That's my answer to that. Okay, this is not much better here. Okay, you're welcome. Okay, so I'm remembering that my smoother side is this one. It was the side that had the glue put on it and it's wet. So this is going to be my upward face. And this is one of the trickiest things for most students when we learn this. The upward face is going to be the one that has the inward crease in it. Like this is what's going to face out. So remind yourself, make a note that I always have trouble with the terminology, but let's just call this crease in, because crease out would be like that, and that's wrong. So that's going to be the face of your Brugmansia, crease out. So I'm going to fold this over with that wet side up, the quote unquote wet side up. I'm going to align it the best I can. I want all the grain to be facing the same way. So I'm going to use the faint, what's left over of these machine lines to help me sort of get those lined up. I'm going to give it a really good straight crease, straight as I can. Okay. All right, and we're already on to cutting, which is great. I've got my chipboard template. They all need to be the same. So if you cut 5 of these upside down T's, cut them all out of the same part of the bottom of your roll. Because if you cut one from one end and one from the other, you're not going to end up with the same amount of pink across the board. So you need to be cutting from the same part of the roll, all of your T's for all 5 of them for one flower. And then to make sure that you're consistently aligned in color as well, I always align the bottom because I know this is the same on all 5 pieces, and I'm gonna and I freehanded the top part, so I know the bottom was cut along a machine line and it's straight. So I'm gonna align that just like that. I'm gonna take a pencil, which I rarely ever do, but this is so unwieldy and long that I have to trace it. So I'm gonna trace the top, and I'm just gonna come along the side. And this is the beautiful part about using chipboard here, is it's not gonna waver. I'm just gonna do a simple tracing. Gets a little dodgy at the end, so just be careful. There's a little bit of texture at the bottom of this template. You'll see on the template drawing, so tiny little bumps. And then I'm gonna come around, a little bit of freestyle there, it's fine. Okay, so trace that on there. Cutting it is you want to get rid of some bulk when you're cutting it, because the weight of this laminated hard paper can flop down and make things difficult. So I'm going to cut off that chunk. I'm going to kind of cut off some chunks that might get in my way. And then I'll start here. And go right along the lines. Okay. And then you really have to hold it together, like clamp it with your finger, when your thumb and finger when you do the bottom, so it doesn't slip out and you cut one different than the other. They have to be, uniformity is pretty key on this one, on this flower. It's so geometrical at its core. Okay. Okay. Okay, so now I have the same thing you've been seeing over and over, a really nice piece here. This will be the front, and I'm gonna need 5 of those. So now we've gotten through cutting out our panels. That's pretty good. Next thing. I have some ones over here that may or not match this. I think they do. They may not. Yeah, they do. Okay. So now we're going to learn how to put them together, because what we need to do is make one of these accordions. There's a little bit of babysitting each seam on this, but it goes rather quickly once you get the hang of it. Most important thing to remember, every time you attach 2 panels together, you're going to attach them face to face. So if these are the 2 faces with the creases in, I'm going to be putting glue along here, and then they're going to kiss face to face, and then I'm going to reopen it, and then I'm going to have 2 things attached together with creases in. You'll see, I'm about to do it. How much glue and where is going to be shown on this upside down template page. I'm going to bring a very small bead of glue from top at the very edge, down, 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 down. And then you're going to see something labeled inflection point. And that's where we're going to stop, because we attach the rest of this in a different manner. So we're going to bring the glue. You can see all of these are attached just to that inflection point. So don't glue the whole thing. On your template, it says glue seam inflection point. That's where you stop. So I'm going to sort of make a little fingernail mark on my template, on my panel, to remind me to stop gluing right there. And then I'm going to get some glue. Okay. And I can't see the inflection point. Hold on. There it is. Okay. All right. And then you want just a little over, like a little over 1/16 inch of glue. This is a great little eyeliner brush that I like to use. Just a small brush. And what happens is this paper is so stiff now because it's become almost like plastic with the layers of glue in it, which is great. That's what I'm looking for in a long lasting flower. Many of my paper flowers are made that way because so much effort goes into them. You want them to last. So that's why we use this laminated paper. But what happens as you're putting the glue on is it starts to break down and soften the paper a little bit, which is going to help you. So you can, take a minute doing this. Okay, so I've got my glue all the way up. Smooth it out. Try not to have too much excess on there because of what you're going to do next. Okay, so I have glue down to the inflection point. So now, like I was saying, I'm going to take my second piece and they're going to kiss face to face. And you really need them all to be the same size. You got to practice. Maybe you make 10 of them and use your best 5, but you need to, your best luck is going to happen if you have 5 exact same size panels and you glue them in the same manner. Another thing I do before I make them kiss face to face is I align the bottom. So I find the bottom, because I cut them all the same, and then I'll kind of compare the curve right here. Is the curve sort of landing the same? And I'll kind of make a amalgam of, is my bottom looking okay? And is my curve matching? Because that's going to get you in real trouble if your curves aren't matching. And then from inflection point up, I'm just going to glue them together. It takes practice, but I have to say, everybody did an amazing job. And when I taught this in person, maybe it's because I pre-cut the panels, so that was not a wild card, but I think there's something innate about putting things together like this that is actually not that hard, and I bet you can do it. So your top's probably not going to match, and that's fine. but my curve is looking good and I can feel that it's all the way in. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to gently, what I say, babysit it, is I'm going to kind of hope I didn't put too much glue on, and I'm going to keep pressing it closed for a bit. Thumbnail is a great tool. Whoever just asked me, have I tried cutting on a cricket, whatever let me say, it's a cry cut. Is it I think it's a cricket. We're all famous in this house for saying words wrong. I have not, but I think you can use it, but I'm a hand cutter. Okay, so I've compressed it, and yeah, the thumbnail is going to come into play a lot here. And then I'm just going to kind of draw my nail along in that same width that I think the glue is, just to make sure I'm good. And then I'm going to slowly open it. And while I open it, I'm going to, whatever feels natural, I'm going to bend back seam over while I'm opening the front. Make sure your hands are clean when you do this, because the glue leaves a gray residue. So you're going to kind of work on making sure it's closed in the front while you're pushing the seam over to one side on the back. I can see I'm a little off right there, but I'm not going to worry about it. I don't know what happened there. Maybe too much glue. I'm going to try to adjust it by hand. So in the back, I'm pressing it over. In the front, I'm just making sure we're attached. I feel like down here closer to my inflection point, the glue didn't take, so you can come back and keep pushing it. Okay. Then if it's better to have a little more glue and have to tear it open a little bit more than it is to not have enough glue, but you really want to get just the right amount of glue on when you do it the first time. So now I'm going to babysit this by, not only am I pressing the seam closed, but I am flipping it back on one side to kind of complete. I'm not gluing it down, I'm just pushing it down. And so that's what my front would look like. If it looks too open to you, after it's dried, I found if you see how I've pushed the seam to one side there. After it dries, if it still doesn't look perfect to you, try flipping the seam over to the other side all the way down the back. Oh, let me get under the frame here. Somehow that can kind of make up for the front not looking perfect. Yeah, but for now, I'm going to let it dry just like that. Okay. So is gluing down to the inflection point okay with everybody? Clear, pretty clear? So now before you move on to the next one, while it's still damp, you want to take both pieces and flip them forwards. And it gets a little weird at the inflection point, but we have a way of working that out later. But you want to make as smooth of a transition as you can when you flip those two pieces out. Jess, is it like pressing a seam with sewing? FYI, I have absolutely no sewing experience, so any reference to anything sewing related is lost on me. But I am pressing it with my fingers. So again, we started like this. We were face to face. Do you remember? We were like this. We glued it on. We sealed it the best we could down to the inflection point. We opened it like this. We pressed the seam down in the back, pressing that down. Looks great in the front. And now as a last thing before it sets up, we flip these two pieces forward. And we kind of pinch that area there so it's at the inflection so it looks okay. And then we let that sit and rest. I'm going to do that one more time, and then we're going to move on to closing it, and then we're going to go on to what you do on the ends. All right, we're making really good time for one of these things, but please let me know if I'm going too fast. Okay, so again, I'm going to mark my inflection point based on what my template page says. So just put a little tiny fingernail mark right there. I have one that I cut it. Sorry, okay, and then I'm going to quickly do this. I just want you to see it again in case anybody missed any of it. glue down to the inflection point. I'm all business right now, but we'll have fun in a little bit. Let me just get through part of this. I'm going sloppy. You can do better than this. I'm just slopping through this. Okay, I'm gonna wipe that down a little bit. So uniformity is key on how we do all of this. So again, take my next panel, crease in, but it's gonna face this one when I put it on. This is how it's gonna look when it's done, but in order to do that, I have to put it face to face. So again, align the bottom, but also align the curve. The curve is going to give you the most trouble. The bottom won't matter as much, but that helps you kind of set it. You balance those things out. And now inflection point up. Let me take it off the table there. Start working it until it's on there. And again, these are seams that you want to spend 5 minutes on, probably, 4 or 5 minutes on each, like babysitting them, just keep pinching them to make sure they're sealed. Drawing your thumb along at a certain point to make sure it's really sealed up to like a 1/16 of an inch or more, and then can open after that. So I'm pressing. I'm checking to make sure nothing's coming out of alignment. I haven't pushed anything to be unaligned. That would be a bummer. Okay. And then when I feel like that has taken well enough, you start to slowly open it up. And again, bending the seam backwards. And I don't care what direction you go with that. I don't think I always go to the push the seam down to the right. Maybe it's helpful that they all go the same direction. I actually don't know. Maybe since I do it all the same direction, you should too, but I'm pressing it down to the right. I feel like there's something going on right there where it's coming apart a little bit. So I'm going to rub the area that needs to be stuck together a little bit more. And then I feel more confident as I open it. Yep, that really helped actually. My inflection point, or right as the curve starts, I feel like that's not doing the best it could. So I'll rub that, make that stick. Okay. That one almost wants to flip the other way. My seam kind of feels more natural at that point to flip the other way. So I'm just going to go with it. Okay. And then down here, I'm at the inflection point, and I probably would have waited like 2 or 3 more minutes before I did this, but I'm going to flip these 2 parts forward and kind of pinch everything. So I know it's going to look pretty smooth at that intersection. We'll deal with that little nub later. Okay. So there, you're already like, I might reinforce those creases a little bit. Not a big deal, but I might like bend those in. Okay. Want to say one more thing about this. So the first crease I did, remember I said if it's looking to open, one thing I do sometimes is after it's dry, I come back in and flip the back crease to the other side. So let's see if that works today. So here I go. And yeah, I'm feeling like that looks, you probably can't see, but it looks a little more closed because I went after it dried and flipped the crease the other way in the background. So I don't know why that is, but hopefully you follow that. And I can try to explain it again in the future if you're not following that, but I can see that after it dried, I flipped the back crease to the opposite side of where it was, and it really helps with that seam. Are you seeing that? Hopefully you are. Okay, great. Okay, so you need to do that 5 times. So you've got the 5 on there. So that's when you get here.